32 days into the partial government shutdown, and there's still no end in sight. And as CBS's Mark Liverman reports, the 800,000 federal workers affected are set to miss another paycheck this week.
Done. The shutdown hopefully will not last long.
That was President Trump on Twitter just hours before the longest government shutdown in history began 1 month ago.
Anything to say about Democrats rejecting your deal?
Yesterday, he ignored questions about the ongoing shutdown at the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial, but he stayed active on social media, telling Democrats to stop playing games and give America the security it deserves.
We are aghast that he wants this giant 30-foot wall to be the symbol of America.
Democrats have rejected the president's latest proposal. 3 years of legal status for some refugees and immigrants brought here by undocumented parents in exchange for $5.7 billion in wall funding.
He is now holding the American people hostage over a vanity project that he calls a wall.
The Senate is expected to vote on the president's plan this week. Meanwhile, House Democrats will vote on their own legislation to reopen the government without any wall funding.
If this carries on until February, March, it's going to be bad for everybody.
Nancy Anderson and about 800,000 other federal workers face a second missed paycheck this week. Many are relying on donations and food banks to survive.
When you're running out of food, you got to feed your family, and it's tough.
The TSA said 10% of screeners called in sick on Sunday, many due to financial limitations. Mark Liverman, CBS News.
Also in this morning's news, another Democrat has announced a run for president. California Senator Kamala Harris threw her hat in the ring. Senators Elizabeth Warren and Kirsten Gillibrand have already announced initial steps towards a presidential campaign. We're learning more about the man who exchanged gunfire with Billings police and was eventually shot and killed by officers. Police Chief Rich St. John described 26-year-old Chance Mavity of Shepherd as a violent offender with a known history of crime and warrants out for his arrest. The ordeal happened Sunday afternoon when officers were called to a pawn shop on 1st Avenue North in Billings, where 3 individuals were attempting to sell stolen guns. When officers arrived, Mavity took off on foot. Police say he did not comply with the officers to stop and instead raised a handgun and fired back. The shootout ended with officers firing 19 rounds, killing Mavity on scene.
There is an officer caution alert, which goes out with our officers every day in briefing. Those admonitions that he was possibly armed and intending to shoot it out.
According to St. John, Mavity has a lengthy criminal history with warrants out of Missoula County and a criminal past in Carbon County. Once the investigation wraps up, the case will head to the Yellowstone County Attorney's Office for a coroner's inquest. In other news, yesterday's snowfall is resulting in some changes for local schools today. Classes are canceled for Lodgegrass schools today. St. Charles Mission will have a 2-hour delayed start. Prior public schools will start at 11 a.m. and buses will be delayed 3 hours. St. Lebray Catholic Schools will have a 2-hour delayed start at 10 a.m. and all buses will run 2 hours later than usual. Billings Public Schools will use alternate bus routes. For a full list of those routes, you can head to our website. Monday's continuous snowfall also put some brand new equipment at the Billings Logan International Airport to the test. As Q2's Connor Pregaster explains, the new snow removal equipment replaces 20-year-old snowplows.
The 2 new machines combine a 22-foot blade on the front and a 20-foot brush mounted in the middle. The machines, model name MB5, represent a significant increase in technology over the existing plows, which were beginning to become a burden to maintain. Airport mechanics spent a significant amount of time on maintenance and troubleshooting for the previous 20-year-old plows, and replacement parts were becoming increasingly difficult to find. In winter events, the plows can be required to operate for extended periods of time, and therefore their reliability is extremely important. The other factor of high importance is driver safety. The new plows offer much better visibility to operators with additional windows in the cab, and the mid-machine placement of the broom ensures that no snow is directed into the operator's line of sight. Airport Operations Manager Mick McCarthy says that the new plows are performing admirably in their first big snowstorm.
We changed to these new plow broom combos so we can have one operator actually run. It's essentially two pieces of equipment at the same time. We've been busy this morning, and but we're keeping everything open. Flights are going in and out on time, and everybody's happy so far.
And smoothly is truly the operative word. The cab of those things is quiet and steady, and hopefully that will keep the runways here clear for years to come. With that, let's send it back to the studio.
Thank you, Connor. From the 66th session in Helena, Republican Senator Mike Cuff from Eureka is proposing a legislative resolution to urge lawmakers in Washington, D.C. to pass legislation to delist the grizzly bear. The measure would also encourage Montana's congressional delegation to do the work to make it happen. Cuff believes grizzly bear populations have recovered enough after spending years on the endangered species list. Still, he says a delisting does not necessarily mean no protections for grizzly bears at all.
Many protective measures continue in place. Federal agencies like U.S. Forest Service have already been studying continuing regulations for grizzly bear protection. This is not a removal of everything.
But there is another factor in this piece of legislation, the right to hunt grizzly bears. Cuff says if passed, that decision would be up to state wildlife agencies, again giving the control back to the state to manage. Meanwhile, a proposed bill would honor a fallen Montana deputy by establishing the Mason Moore Memorial Highway. At the legislature Monday, the House Transportation Committee heard House Bill 156. It would establish U.S. Highway 287 as the Memorial Highway. Moore was a Broadwater County Sheriff's deputy when he was shot and killed in the line of duty in May of 2017. A sign would also be installed at mile marker 109 where Moore died with his name, date of passing, and badge number. Moore's wife, Jody Moore, and Sheriff Wynn Meehan were there to give emotional testimony on Monday.
It's a way just to honor him and bring some closure and also put that to remember that law enforcement officers are human and they have families and they're loved by somebody out there too.
The committee voted unanimously to advance the bill. Hundreds of members of law enforcement, first responders, and citizens attended Moore's funeral. Lloyd Barras is charged with deliberate homicide by accountability for Moore's death. During last fall's campaign, MTM News and Montana State University teamed up for a first ever poll asking Montanans about their views on the election, elected officials, and top issues. Now we've followed up with those who answered the poll and asked them more about how they voted in November and why. MTN Chief Political Reporter Mike Dennison and MSU political scientist David Parker delve into those answers on the U.S. Senate and House races.
In the high-profile U.S. Senate race won by Democrat Jon Tester, we had President Donald Trump visit the state 4 times, attempting to boost Republican turnout for challenger Matt Rosendale. Our poll showed that, for the most part, the partisan voters came home. 99% of those identifying as Democrats went for Tester, and 91% of Republicans stuck with Rosendale. But Tester won the independents by 61 to 34%, a significant edge. We also asked voters whether their choice was influenced by President Trump or the divisive hearings on Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh. 45% said their choice was not related to Trump. 30% said they voted to support the president, and 24% said it was a vote against the president. On the Kavanaugh hearing, 60% said it factored into their vote. Of those, 58% said they voted for Rosendale, but 40% said they chose Tester. But there's more to this Kavanaugh effect, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. If you thought the hearings were important and they mattered to you, you voted for Matt Rosendale, and if you didn't, then you voted for Jon Tester. But here's the nuance. What happened is that more Republicans, it mattered, so they came home. A lot of independents, it didn't really matter so much, and overwhelmingly those independents went for Jon Tester. And I think that was really key here in the race. The Kavanaugh hearings had an effect to get Matt Rosendale's base back in line where he needed it to be. The problem is you can't win on base alone in Montana, and Jon Tester won with an overwhelming advantage among independents.
So now let's take a look at some of the results in the House race. Here we also had a very partisan breakdown. 99% of Democrats went for Democratic challenger Kathleen Williams, and 95% of Republicans chose GOP Congressman Greg Gianforte, who won the race by 5 percentage points. Williams won independents, but by a lesser margin than Tester, 53 to 43%. We also asked if Gianforte's assault of a reporter on the eve of his first election in 2017 influenced voters. 56% said not much or not at all, and they mostly voted for Gianforte. 73% of Republicans said it didn't influence their vote at all, and 83% of Democrats said it did. But we also had a Trump effect in this race, didn't we?
You know, the irony is Donald Trump came to the state 4 times to try to defeat Senator Tester. But we do know, as political scientists, that House races are very easily nationalized. So I think those visits, according to the data, seem to suggest to me that Trump succeeded in nationalizing the race, and that helped Greg Gianforte. If you look at the data among independent voters, you see very clearly independent voters did not break as heavily for Kathleen Williams as they did for Tester, 1. And 2, she didn't do as well as among Republicans. There was a 3-point difference between how Jon Tester did among Republicans and Kathleen Williams. And that between the loss of those independent voters, some of whom approve of the job that Jon Tester's doing, probably led to her defeat.
Thanks, David. Tomorrow we'll take a look at the poll results for the initiatives. I'm Mike Dennison with David Parker for MTN, reporting from Bozeman.
About 1,400 people responded to the mail poll, and the results have a margin of error of 2.6%.